In this conference, we are going to talk about the crisis in the Church and how it really began. From the very beginning of man's existence, there has been a battle between good and evil, between the Church of God and the devil. There was first of all a great battle in heaven, when Michael and the good angels cast out Satan and the rebellious angels, who refused to obey God. Now the devil is angry, and he does his utmost to prevent souls from going to heaven. He is angry because he, a fallen angel who was created superior to man, has been forever denied access to heaven, while we human beings have the opportunity to go there. The Catholic Church, with her teachings of truth, is his greatest enemy, because it is through her that souls are saved and go to heaven. And so he makes war upon the Church. His first temptation, which was most successful, and still is today, was an appeal to man's pride. He said to Eve, "If you eat of this fruit, you will be like God." He tempts man today to make himself like God, to be his own God, and man ends up by saying, as Lucifer did, "I will not serve." When Adam and Eve were cast out of paradise in punishment for their sin, God said to Lucifer, "I will put enmities between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed. She shall crush thy head, and thou shalt lie in wait for her heel." The Fathers of the Church all see in this passage a reference to the Blessed Virgin Mary. But since Our Lady is also a figure of the Church, these words can equally well be applied to the Church. It is true, from the beginning there have been enmities between the Church and the devil. There were, first of all, open persecutions. In the Old Testament, the just men, the patriarchs and prophets, were persecuted by the enemies of God. This was particularly seen in the case of the people of Israel. They were God's chosen people, and they prefigured the Church, the Catholic Church of today. With the coming of our Lord and the establishment of Christianity, there were also the open persecutions of Christians by the Roman emperors in particular, beginning with Nero and ending with the reign of Constantine and the death of Diocletian. There were, after that, of course, still many other persecutions and heresies which were spread abroad, mostly from without the Church. But finally the Church's enemies realized that if they wished to overcome her, it was useless to try open persecution alone. She must be betrayed from within, just as our Lord was betrayed not from an outsider, not by an outsider, but from within the circle of his own chosen apostles. We see how they succeeded because we see the great crisis in the Church today. Yet we must not assume that Vatican II was the beginning of this infiltration, this revolution in the Church. It was rather the result of hundreds of years of careful planning on the part of the Church's enemies, in particular the Freemasons. And so we shall go back in time to look at how the Freemasons were founded and how the plan to infiltrate the Church is largely due to them. In the Middle Ages, there were a group of men called stoneworkers, and it is they who came to be known as the Freemasons. The name Freemason comes from brother mason, friar mason, or Freemason, as the stoneworkers were known. They were employed in building cathedrals, monasteries, churches, and so on throughout the Middle Ages, and they became very skilled at their trade. The skills of their trade were jealously guarded and passed on from father to son. They adopted secret symbols and codes among themselves to safeguard the skills of their trade from outsiders. After the Protestant revolt, also called the Reformation, which took place in the year 1517, the stoneworkers, or the Freemasons, they had less work to do, and so they admitted men of other trades to their guilds. It was the age of the destruction of the great buildings, the churches, rather than of building, and because of this, they had less work to do, and men of other trades were admitted to the guilds of the stone workers, the stonemasons. From about this date, 1517, those who plotted to overthrow the monarchy made use of these societies, as also did Socinus, who worked for the destruction of Christianity, and many others after him. With their codes, secrecy, and brotherhood, or companionship, the Freemasons were a great asset to such revolutionaries. However, it was not until the year 1717 that the Grand Lodge of London was founded as a more organized society. It spread rapidly to France, Ireland, Germany, Italy, Spain, and all of Europe within 20 years. There were two great apostles of Freemasonry, apostles of the devil, or anti-apostles if you like. The first of these was born of Catholic parents and given the name Francis Mary Arrowet. However, for some unknown reason, he chose to call himself Voltaire, and it is by that name that he is known to this day. As I said, he was born of good Catholic parents. He received a good Catholic education by the Jesuits. However, he apostatized. He lived in an age of corruption. This was particularly the case among the nobility, and particularly in the country of France in which he lived. The courts of even the so-called Christian emperors, Catherine of Russia and Frederick of Prussia, they too were cesspools of vice, and it was not long before the young Voltaire was carried along to vice and infidelity. The libertines hated the Church, the Catholic Church, who alone raised her voice to cry for purity in this age of corruption. Voltaire was imprisoned for his crimes, and after some time spent in the Bastille, he was exiled to England. He was filled with a great hatred for the monarchy, which had had him imprisoned, and for the Catholic Church, who condemned his crimes. He, Voltaire, joined the newly organized Society of Freemasonry in London, and since he had such a great hatred for the Catholic Church and for the monarchy, he found great delight in their teachings and rapidly absorbed them, so that he soon became their greatest apostle. He was soon justly known as the most perfect incarnation of Satan that the world ever saw, at least until that time. Voltaire was very talented with his pen, and he used it to spread the new principles of Freemasonry, and especially to attack the church. His writings found great favor with the corrupt society. Voltaire had but one feeling for Christ: eternal contemptuous hatred. He laid down a plan for his many disciples, a plan to destroy the church, firstly by the suppression of the Jesuits and other religious orders, confiscating their goods. He reasoned that since the Jesuits especially, as well as the other religious, were largely responsible for preaching and educating the people in their faith, if the people were not well instructed in their faith, if these religious were destroyed, the people would be more ignorant and more easily give up their Catholic faith to take on the principles of the Freemasons and work for a one-world order and a one-world religion. The suppression of the Jesuits took place in the 18th century, at least temporarily, and today we see how they succeeded, the Freemasons succeeded, in having the religious orders destroyed. We see such a great destruction of all religious life has taken place since Vatican II. Voltaire also planned to deprive the Pope of his temporal authority, and the Church likewise. This took place in the year 1870 with the suppression of the Papal States, and ever since then the Pope has had less and less authority over the state. Secular and anti-Catholic education was to be introduced into the schools. The principle of divorce was to be promoted and praised, and respect for the clergy was to be destroyed. All of this has been carried out just as Voltaire had planned. Then there was to be an open persecution, followed by a universal brotherhood, without God, morals, or laws. Voltaire, however, knew better. He always acted against his better knowledge. One time he broke a blood vessel, and believing himself to be near death, he called for a Catholic priest, made a good confession, and ordered a public retraction of his errors to be printed in the newspapers. When he recovered, however, he relapsed to his former ways, and he died miserably, crying, "I am abandoned by God and man." His doctor said that if all those who read his writings could have seen his unhappy end, there would be very few left who believed in them. Unfortunately, however, very few saw his unhappy end, and his writings and the principles of Freemasonry spread rapidly among society. The second apostle of Freemasonry is known as Adam Weishaupt. He was born a Jew, converted to the Catholic faith, and became a Catholic priest, a Jesuit professor of canon law. Prompted by the newly organized house of the Rothschilds, who has controlled the banking system ever since, Adam Weishaupt defected from his priesthood and from the faith, and he organized a branch of Freemasonry known as the Illuminati. He drew up a standard of rules, of aims for the Illuminati, who were particularly organized to work for a one-world government and a one-world religion. He finished his task on the 1st of May, 1776, which is hailed as the birthday of the Illuminati, and held in great honor by the Freemasons ever since. Every war, beginning with the French Revolution and including the First and Second World Wars, every war up till this day, from the date of their foundation, has been promoted and organized by the Illuminati. Adam Weishaupt said the word Illuminati is derived from Lucifer and means holders of the light. Because although Freemasons may profess themselves to be atheists, in reality they are worshippers of Lucifer. Adam Weishaupt recruited 2,000 paid followers, consisting mostly of skilled tradesmen and high-ranking businessmen. Then he established lodges of the Grand Orient to be their secret headquarters. And in all of this he was financed by the Rothschilds. Anyhow, you see how Adam Weishaupt and Voltaire greatly advanced the spread of Freemasonry, and this prepared the way for the year 1789, which was the year the French Revolution took place. The French Revolution was an open rebellion against the hierarchy and the monarchy, against the church and the state. In the French Revolution, the standards of the Freemasons, their principles, were openly paraded. They promoted a religion of all religions, which was religious liberty. There was to be no religion better than another, or no man better than another. This was equality. Everybody was to get on well with everyone else, regardless of how he got on with God. This was fraternity. These three principles, liberty, equality, and fraternity, became known as the motto of the French Revolution. It is this this motto that is held up by all who are working for a new world order. It is this motto also, liberty, equality, and fraternity, which was applied to the Church at the Second Vatican Council, as we shall see later on, which is why Vatican II has justly been called the Revolution in the Church. In the year 1859, a document came into the hands of the Catholics and was published. It was known as the Alta Vendita, or the Permanent Instruction for the Destruction of the Church. It was written by a high-ranking Freemason as a permanent instruction for all Freemasons. In it, he instructed how the destruction of the Church was to be planned and to be brought about. He said, "We do not mean to win the popes to our cause, to make them neophytes of our principles and propagators of our ideas. That would be a ridiculous dream, no matter in what manner events may turn. It is to the young we must go," he said. "It is to the youth we must go. It is them we must seduce. It is them we must bring under the banner of the secret societies. Now then, in order to secure to us a pope according to our own heart, it is necessary to fashion for that pope a generation worthy of the kingdom of which we dream. Leave on one side old age and middle life, go to the youth, and if possible, even to children. The reputation of a good Catholic and good patriot will open the way for our doctrines to pass into the hearts of the young clergy, and go even to the depths of convents. In a few years, the young clergy will have, by the force of events, invaded all offices. They will govern, administer, and judge. They will form the council of the sovereign. They will be called upon to choose a pontiff who will reign, and that pontiff, like the greater part of his contemporaries, will be necessarily imbued with the Italian and humanitarian principles which we are about to put in circulation. This was the aim of the Freemasons. This was the development of Voltaire's plot to destroy the Church, and the goal was the same as the goal of Voltaire, of Adam Weishaupt, and of the French Revolution had been: the destruction of all Christianity, but especially of Catholics. The year 1889 was the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution, and to commemorate this event, the Freemasons erected a statue of Giordano Bruno in Rome. Giordano Bruno was a Dominican friar who taught most of the heresies which are promoted today. He denied the divinity of Christ, the virginity of Mary, the eternity of hell, and the doctrine of transubstantiation. He also promoted pantheism and that all religions lead to God. He symbolized the ideals of the Freemasons. Let the Catholic priest be the one to introduce Freemasonry to the Church. The Freemasons, have succeeded very well in their dream, even perhaps beyond their wildest expectations. In the year 1962, the Second Vatican Council began. This was the beginning of revolution in the Church. This was when the principles of the French Revolution were openly paraded at Vatican II and applied to the Church. We see this, in particular, in the following documents: Dignitatis Humanae, or the dignity of the human person, promoted religious liberty. Here is a quote: "Founded on the dignity of the human person, religious liberty demands equal rights in civil society for all forms of worship. Society must then be neutral and guarantee the protection of every religion within the limits of public order." This principle of religious liberty is completely contrary to what the Catholic Church had taught for almost 20 centuries. The Catholic Church has always claimed that she alone is the true Church, and outside of herself, outside the Catholic Church, there is no salvation. Equality was promoted in many documents, in particular in the document Lumen Gentium. Lumen Gentium promoted the idea that the College of Bishops, together with the Pope, exercises supreme power in the Church. In the traditional teaching, the Pope alone held the supreme position of authority in the Church. This document, and many of the other documents as well, promoted the idea that it was rather a college of bishops, a group of bishops, together with the Pope, who governed the Church. This was the principle of equality applied to the Church. Then, in the document Unitatis Redintegratio, the idea of ecumenical fraternity was promoted. This was the idea that Catholics, Protestants, and members of other faiths and creeds should have meetings together and try to get along well with each other, regardless of their differences of opinion. They should all be one big happy family. This was the false brotherhood, which the Freemasons also had been working for. This is also contrary to the Catholic teaching of all time, who has always taught that it is wrong for Catholics to have fellowship with members of other religions, especially to worship together and to have public ceremonies, public worship together. That is completely contrary to the faith, because that is like saying that the other religions, they are right as well. This is absolutely contrary to the true teachings of the Church. There is much more information to be found in the Conciliar documents of how the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity were applied to the Church. If you wish to study further, the references, the information is there in those Conciliar documents. Having seen all this, the situation may appear to be hopeless, but we know it is not, because we have the promise of Christ that the gates of hell shall not prevail against the Church. There is also a quote from Psalm 128, verses 1 and 2, in which Israel is taken to be a figure of the Church. Often have they fought against me from my youth, let Israel now say. Often have they fought against me from my youth, but they could not prevail over me. This quote, this promise of Christ, that the gates of hell will never prevail against the Church, gives us hope. And so we shall close with a poem. The Church has had many a battle from the time of her tender youth, but her enemies shall not prevail, for she has the word of truth. The Church was once in Abel, as he fought with the wicked Cain, but the Church shall last forever, though Abel has been slain. The Church was once in Enoch, yet he was taken away, the unrighteous who are fighting to this day. The Church was once in Noah, as he and his household alone endured the flood while the wicked perished with their own. The Church was in Lot and Abraham, the prophets and all the rest. The Israelites by the Egyptians, as the Church were sorely oppressed. The Church since the coming of Jesus has dwelt in believing hearts. She says, "Wonder not, my children, that the enemy never departs. They have fought against me often from the time of my tender youth, but they never shall prevail, for I have the word of truth." Thank you for listening.